Seventh grade, we are starting a new chapter in our history textbook. Chapter 2 is all about Reconstruction. And history is a fascinating thing, especially in the United States, because there's so many parts and times that are pretty awful. And right now, there's a whole lot of people on the news and on social media who are saying that 2020 has got to be the worst year in American history, or something close to it. And I would argue that the Civil War was probably the worst time, because we actually had American citizens trying to leave the country, and we had American citizens fighting to keep the country together. We had others fighting to separate that. We had the North and the South. We had slave states. We had free states. We had tons of chaos. And we had American citizens killing each other every single day by the thousands, right? I mean, the Civil War has got to be the lowest of low in American history, at least for a lot of historians. You're certainly welcome to argue that. I can see that argument too. But, man, today we're talking about not the Civil War, but the exact after point of the Civil War. The Civil War ends, and we've had a war that's gone on for about 4 years that has basically torn apart the United States. It has destroyed the economic systems that have been established. We've had hundreds of thousands of people killed. And now how in the world are we going to bounce back from that? How are we going to get past that chaos, past that hatred, past those southern-northern divide things, and get back to American life? And that's what we're talking about today, is rebuilding, reconstructing the awfulness that the Civil War was. So we're going through our whole lesson today. Make sure you have your textbook ready to go, whether that's a paper textbook or that is online, and then make sure you also have those guide sheets ready to rock too. All right? Thanks, Evan. Let's do it. Lesson 1, Planning Reconstruction. To start, I'd like to watch a little video.
When Gettysburg was over, there were many more battles and almost 2 years to go, but it was the flood tide of Southern hopes. From then on, Britain and France backed away from all the seductive appeals to come in on the Southern side. And at the end of it, what? The South was beaten, and much worse, it was devastated. The Cotton Kingdom was destroyed. The plantation system, with all its evils and its virtues, was debauched. 4 million slaves were freed, but there was nowhere for them to go. The land, simply the natural richness of the land and the man-made culture of the South, were defiled. In a single long march of 60,000 men from Atlanta to the sea, General Sherman destroyed every town, rail yard, mansion, crop across a swathe of 60 miles. So the Union held. At what a price! Germany, after the Second War, was hardly so badly off as the conquered South. And it was not only conquered, it was now to be punished. It took the most strenuous efforts of General Grant to prevent Lee and the other Confederate generals from being brought to a Nuremberg trial. They were traitors, weren't they? That's what the Northern politicians thought, and they said if the Southerners get their rights back, they'll run the Congress and the country. So, several Southern states were put under military control, and in these and others, the whites were totally disenfranchised.
A little bit of an idea for you of just how complicated this is going to be. We are going to take a nation that's been ripped apart, and we are going to now try to get it back into one piece and get it to work together and build things that were destroyed and fix things up. Not to mention all the racial problems that are going on in the 1860s and all the political problems, and oof, man, there's tons of issues, right? Well, how are we going to move forward? The Reconstruction debate. I'd like you to read that section right now. All right, now that you read that, There's a few things I want to point out to you about that. The key thing is Reconstruction. You got to know what Reconstruction is, guys. It's the topic of our whole chapter. Reconstruction is the rebuilding of the Confederate States and readmitting them into the Union. We're going to literally reconstruct, rebuild, at times, the South so that it can be a part of our country again. And that's not going to be an easy thing. And to do that now, we're going to talk about different plans. Because you know what? There's a whole lot of emotion, there's a whole lot of anger, there's a whole lot of outrage about what the South did, and now how are we going to get them back into our country so that we can be a country again. I'd like you to read Lincoln's 10% plan. Do that now. All right, guys, Lincoln is going to get a lot of flack for this plan. But it is a plan he's going to try to convince people to buy into. He's going to try to get the government, Congress, to say, well, that's a good idea. So basically, to get the country, to get these states back in, he's going to require a few things. The first thing he's going to require is, he's going to need voters in each southern state to take an oath of loyalty. Hey, you were a part of the Confederacy. You basically said you don't want to be a part of this country anymore. Now you're going to have to take an oath of loyalty to the Union. That is, to the idea of the United States as a country. When 10% of the voters in a state have taken the oath, the state could form a new state government. So Lincoln says, you know what, if we can get 10% to buy in, we'll be okay. He also required that they would adopt a new constitution. And that constitution needed to ban slavery. He didn't want to punish the South. He wanted to be easy on the South. And there was a whole bunch of people who did not like that. Basically, Lincoln is seen as a big softy when it comes to the end of the Civil War. At least he was seen that way by people who were living during the Civil War. Right? He also offers amnesty. Amnesty is forgiveness for any crimes committed to those who had sworn loyalty to the Union. Again, Lincoln is seen as someone who wasn't hard enough. We want someone who's going to be a lot harder on these southern states. One group that was especially hard on southern states was the Radical Republicans. Go ahead and read that section now. All right, key thing you need to know about the Radical Republicans. They thought, Lincoln, you are way too easy on the South. You're not being hard enough. And these are people who you can understand. I mean, imagine if a civil war broke out in our country and your brother, your cousin, your son, your father dies in this war. Your home is destroyed. You've been living in a totally different type of America because we are no longer... We no longer have enough money and resources to live life like we used to. Now a lot of that's going to the war effort. And you can understand why people will be pretty ticked off. You have a whole lot of Northerners who are really, really angry. And they're kind of run politically by the Radical Republicans. Okay, so they think, Lincoln, you're way too soft. Someone who led them was Thaddeus Stevens. He said, Southern institutions must be broken up and relaid, or all our blood and treasure have been spent in vain. Good. One thing you're going to want to know is called the Wade-Davis Bill. That bill pushed for a majority. Hey, as soon as a majority of the white males in a state swear or pledge loyalty to the Union, you can become a state again. Lincoln said, you know, we need 10%. 10% is not that much, guys. Now, the Radical Republicans are saying, no. We need a majority. 51 or more percent have to buy in. They have to say, I'm all in America, United States, or no, they're not in. Good. And also, they wanted to make sure, you know what? Former Confederates, you can't hold a public office. You are not going to be a mayor. You're not going to be a governor. You're not going to be in charge of anything. You basically proved you're not trustable. Therefore, you lose the right to run for office. Right? Good. So what ends up happening, and I forgot to mention this with the 10% plan, is Lincoln's plan is basically shut down. The Radical Republicans in politics basically say, Lincoln, your plan's too soft. We're not going to go for it. The Radical Republicans' plan was shut down by Lincoln. The president has the power to veto an idea. So Lincoln uses what's called the pocket veto. The pocket veto is basically when you purposely do not sign a bill. A bill can only be on the president's desk for a certain amount of time. As soon as Congress closes or is adjourned, those bills, if they're not signed, they just disappear. They're basically thrown in the garbage. So Lincoln, I'm not signing that. And Congress adjourns and nothing happens. Okay, next, read Founding the Freedmen's Bureau. Go ahead. Guys, this section basically talks about a big issue. And our video that we started with said 4 million African slaves have been freed in the United States. They aren't technically citizens yet. We'll get to a lesson very soon where they will become citizens of the United States. But they're not that yet. So now you have these 4 million people who are kind of caught. They have been stuck their whole lives in slavery. And slavery, the slavery that was in the United States was a really, really terrible slavery for a lot of these people because it didn't provide much education at all. Because education is scary to people who are trying to control other people. You know what? If I want to control slaves, I better make sure they don't know how to read, because if they can read, they might be able to plan how they can escape. If they can read, they might try to play a role in politics. So education has been held back. These slaves are freed, but they don't have money. These Africans, these now soon-to-be African-American citizens, don't have a home to live in. They don't have a job. They don't have access to resources to create a business. So they're caught in a really, really tough place. It's awesome that these slaves are no longer slaves. My goodness, how awesome is it that slavery doesn't exist anymore in our country? But now you have this problem of, okay, now what are they going to do? They're basically stuck because they don't have anything, which is going to be really, really hard. Good. Let's finish by focusing on the Reconstruction Plan of Johnson's plan. Go ahead and read that now. All right, 7. What happens is on April 14th, 1865, Abraham Lincoln attends a play. He goes to a theater. He sits in a private box, the presidential box at Ford's Theater. And there's someone who doesn't really like Lincoln. Well, there's a lot of people who don't like Lincoln, especially if they're from the South, right? So there's an actor, John Wilkes Booth, who is a famous actor across the country, the North and the South. And John Wilkes Booth is known in this theater. So people see him going up the steps toward Lincoln's private booth, and no one really thinks twice about it because, that's John Wilkes Booth. He's famous. He probably wants to go schmooze a little bit with the president, shake hands, things like that. And there's guards outside of this private booth, of this private viewing for Lincoln. He has guards outside, but the guards let him in because this is John Wilkes Booth. He's a famous person. Well, John Wilkes Booth has a gun up his sleeve and shoots the president point blank in the back of the head, right? And Lincoln doesn't die immediately, but within hours he's going to be dead. And we now have a president that's been assassinated. And that's awful in and of itself, but it's also going to cause a big, big issue when it comes to Reconstruction, because with Lincoln gone, if the president is assassinated, the vice president steps in his place. So now Lincoln is killed. Enter Andrew Johnson. Okay, little background for you on Andrew Johnson. Lincoln is running in 1862 for president, and he's looking for someone that is going to convince Southerners to vote for him. So what does Lincoln do? He finds a Republican who is also a Southerner. Andrew Johnson is a Republican Southerner. And Lincoln says, well, you can certainly run with me as my vice president. But he's a Southerner, and that's going to cause some big, big issues. Growing up in the South, Andrew Johnson develops a lot of racist ideas toward black people. And some of that can be seen to the things he's going to do. We're going to talk very soon about how Andrew Johnson was debatably one of the worst presidents that the United States has ever had. We'll talk about that in the future. Okay, but things you need to know about this section. Andrew Johnson creates a plan. He gives amnesty to most Southerners who swear loyalty. He's not super hard on them, but he's also not super easy on them. He also gives pardons if you appeal to the president. Right here it talks about that. A pardon is basically forgiveness. You are forgiven of a crime you've committed. So he says, well, if you ask me to pardon you, I will give it to you. But basically this is a way for him to humiliate Confederate leaders he doesn't like. Now this is a Southerner who knows a lot about the South. And now he is kind of making a power play. Hey, you better come begging to me if you want to be a part of this country again. Good. Big thing. Big problem. Andrew Johnson opposes equal rights for African Americans. Lincoln does a whole lot for African Americans, freeing them from slavery, the Emancipation Proclamation, all these different things to start working towards equality between black and white people. And Andrew Johnson is opposed to that. And that is going to cause a big problem as things progress in the Reconstruction era. Good. Last couple things. Andrew Johnson's plan does outlaw slavery, which is good. Even though you could probably say he's a racist, he still follows Lincoln's idea of we need to get rid of slavery. You must ratify the 13th Amendment if you want to become a part of the United States. Okay, so we have 3 plans. Lincoln's, which was too easy in a lot of people's eyes. The Radical Republicans, which was too hard on the South in a lot of people's eyes. Then you have Andrew Johnson, whose plan kind of is in the middle, but more often than not it favored Southerners. We'll talk more about that as we go on. Okay, 7th grade. Last thing is the 13th Amendment. What did the 13th Amendment accomplish? The 13th Amendment accomplished freedom for all slaves. Slavery is abolished. It's no longer legal to own people, own humans, right? Really big step for our country. All right, let's take a look. Here we've got planning Reconstruction. Let's make sure we have our notes taken care of. Answering questions. As you read the section, answer the questions below. Number 1, defining. Give 2 meanings for the word Reconstruction. Well, Reconstruction can mean to rebuild something. But now more specifically, in United States history, Reconstruction means rebuilding after the Civil War. Next, comparing. Complete the chart by describing each of the Reconstruction plans. Lincoln's plan was that 10% of Southerners need to pledge loyalty to the United States or to the Union for a state to come back. The Radical Republicans said we need 50% or more to pledge loyalty to the United States so that you can become a state again. Number 4, identify what became of the Wade-Davis bill. Let me go back, make sure I give you the right answer. The Wade-Davis bill. That's the bill that the Radical Republicans passed through Congress, through Senate. It came to Lincoln's office, and all Lincoln needed to do was sign off on it to say, this is now law. But Lincoln didn't like this bill. He didn't like this plan that the Radical Republicans did, so he doesn't sign it. Congress adjourns, and that bill dies. 5, describing what did the Freedmen's Bureau do? The Freedmen's Bureau was basically a system to reteach and re-educate, or I should say teach and educate and support blacks that are now free outside of slavery. Really awesome thing the Freedmen's Bureau was. Next, on that backside, Johnson's Reconstruction Plan. 1, identifying cause and effect. What happened on April 14th, 1865? Well, that would be the day that Abraham Lincoln was shot in Ford's Theater by John Wilkes Booth. Who became president? Andrew Johnson takes Lincoln's place. 2, describing in the box. Make a list of Johnson's main ideas about Reconstruction. Well, Johnson wants to make sure that amnesty is given to a whole bunch of Southerners He also was going to pardon those who appeal to him, those higher officials in the South. They got to come begging on their hands and knees to get him to pardon them. He opposes equal rights for African Americans. He allows slavery to be abolished. He is technically a part of slavery leaving the United States, but he is certainly not in favor of African Americans living however they want. He pushes the 13th Amendment that basically is going to end slavery. So those are the big things for Johnson's plan for Reconstruction. All right, guys, thanks for your work. Make sure you keep these notes in your binder. Don't send them back to me. I'm not grading them. Make sure they stay in your binder. They're going to help you on assessments in the future. Thanks, guys. Bye.